should not be displayed to the jury.
Any response?
Your Honor.
Okay. No, Your Honor.
Your Honor, I also had an issue too.
Yep.
I may address the court. Your Honor, I get marked by the prosecutor.
I don't
want-
bark.
I'm going to be doing a oral motion for reconsideration on the acquittal issue. The reason I'm doing it, Your Honor, and I promise you and I assure you it's all new information regarding the acquittal. Yesterday, when we had the argument before the court regarding whether or not the acquittals of Brandon Concerta, AKA Tats, and I think Waywright, and Dan Harris, AKA Beaker, the prosecutor stood up and said, I believe, that this is why we have the relevancy court rule. I'm sure the court recalls him saying that regarding whether it was relevant or not, whether or not it was important to the case. Obviously, I argued we're talking about the conspiracy to kidnap the governor, which is a terrorist act, and they're charged with materially supporting that act. Last night, as I was reading through all of the transcripts yet again, I went to the preliminary exam for reference for prosecuting attorney. It's the probable cause hearing, volume 1. It is occurred on March 3rd of 2021. And I'm going to be citing a couple different pages. But on page 107 of that preliminary exam transcript, there is, here's what is said, Your Honor. So this is, and again, Your Honor, this is Ms. Dadamani before Judge Claren at the probable cause hearing, presenting facts and evidence to the court to show probable cause to bind my client over to circuit court at that preliminary exam. So the question is, let me start with you, Judge. Okay, so how did the Wolverine, this is the question. Okay, so how did the Wolverine Watchmen, or did they use, and specifically related to these 3 defendants in the courtroom, how did they use or deploy this QRF? Now we're to page 107, line 1. Answer, so these defendants created a specific Southeast Michigan QRF. Question, who was on that? Answer, Paul Beller, Dan Harris, our source Dan. Joe was not on the QRF. Pete Musico was not on the QRF. It evolved from a small handful of operators to a larger number as Paul Beller continued to put other members of the Wolverine Watchmen into the QRF chat. I think at one time it had about 11 members. Question. Okay, you mentioned Dan Harris and you mentioned him, I think, before too. Who is he? Answer. So Dan Harris is a leader in the Wolverine Watchmen. He goes by the alias Beaker. Question. And this is the important part, Your Honor. Question. And is he a federally charged defendant? Answer. He is. He's a former Marine and he's charged in federal court with conspiracy to kidnap Governor Whitmer. Objection by Mr. Johnson. Your Honor, I would object to what he's charged with in federal court. It's not relevant here. Court. Response. Ms. Dadamani, it's certainly most relevant, Judge, in that the charges here are providing material support for terrorism, and he is charged with a plot to kidnap the governor in federal court at this very moment. The court all overrule it. So that's issue and point number 1. In their probable cause hearing, to bind this case over to circuit court, they believe that the conspiracy to kidnap the governor was relevant. And of course, they just made my argument. That made my argument by them that the relevancy is that they're charged with conspiracy, the plot to kidnap the governor, and our clients are charged with materially supporting that plot. They go on, page 182, this is still preliminary exam. This is still Ms. Dadamani, volume 1. Page 182, it starts at the bottom, page 25. Okay, and again, this is the question, this is Ms. Dadamani. Okay, what about, were there Wolverine Watchmen members that are currently charged in federal court that attended this training? there were. Yet again, they find it relevant enough at the probable cause hearing to present that to Judge Claren for their bind over, and I'll get to this in a minute, why this is critical as well, Your Honor. Page 200, starting at line 24. Okay, and this is Ms. Dottamati's question. Okay, now did the people that did go down to the Peebles, Ohio meeting, and the courts heard about Peebles, let me start over again. Question. Okay, now did the people that did go down to the Peebles, Ohio meeting, and you said Dan was there, the source, were some of the members that are charged in federal kidnapping plot in attendance at this meeting? Answer, yes. So the Wolverine Watchman members, Caleb Franks, Dan Harris, and Ty Garvin were present at the People's Ohio attack plan meeting. Was Adam Fox there? Adam Fox was there. Judge, that's my first argument. I got one more argument. I would prefer to just make them both at the same time if the court's okay with that.
I don't care. Go ahead.
So, prosecutor stood in front of this court yesterday and said, it's not relevant, Judge. And in fact, that's the very essence and purpose behind this relevancy rule. But at exam, which I didn't catch till last night because I actually read the entire transcripts, everything last night till about midnight, that jumped out at me. I would have brought this to your attention a while ago because it's very relevant. The other thing is I was laying in bed trying to fall asleep. I started thinking about the photographs that were sent, are taken at Wisconsin training. There's 4 people in that photograph, Your Honor. 2 of which are Dan Harris, Brandon Concerta, both acquitted, conspiracy to kidnap the governor, and Paul Beller, my client, and I believe Ty Garvin was present. Not only is it relevant, Your Honor, it is necessary, and here's why. My client is also charged with being a member of a gang. As the court is aware, as the statute says, and as the jury instruction that these jurors are going to get says, is that in order to be convicted of being a gang member or gang involvement, you have to have 5 or more members. They have to be in continuous contact, and there has to be some breaking of the law. My guess is when we go to closing, the 4 individuals in that photograph, they're going to be using Dan Harris and Brandon Concerta to get to the 5 that my client was involved with. How do I know this? I know this because their connection with my client and Adam Fox is this supposed ghost group that my client created on July 7th. And then he goes to training with some members of that ghost group. And then, as the court has already heard to the testimony, he goes to one more training that Pete is not at, that Pete's not at, Joe's not at, Adam's not at, Barry's not at. How do they get to 5? My guess is they're going to have to use Brandon Concerta and Dan Harris. And even if they don't do it in a roundabout way, Your Honor, the jury can count. The jury can, and if I can't go in and say, ladies and gentlemen, the photographs in Wisconsin, 2 of these individuals were found not guilty of plotting to kidnap or conspiracy to kidnap the governor. That takes away their 5 because you use those 4 plus Dan Harris. I'm sorry, informant Dan. You got 5. That gets them to their golden number. So, Your Honor, I think at this point, not only is it relevant because the prosecutor said it was relevant at the probable cause hearing and made it clear it was relevant, it's also necessary because otherwise I don't see how we get to the 5. And as court's aware, there's got to be a breaking of the law to be a gang. Mr. Johnson and Mr. Ballard have said, well, my poker buddies and the church and this and that. That's correct. But if the church or the poker buddies or somebody breaks the law, then they can become a gang just like anybody else. But in this case, they were found not guilty. And so, Your Honor, I'm renewing my request to be able to discuss the acquittals of Dan Harris and Brandon Concerta.
Good morning, Judge. first point I'd make is he's made a motion for reconsideration. Under the law of the state of Michigan, motions for reconsideration must be based on a mistake of law that the court made yesterday. And what Mr. Kirkpatrick has done is he's gone back and read the preliminary examination transcript, and now he has applied more facts to the same argument that he did yesterday. He has not cited any mistake of law by the court. Now, that would be point number one. Point number two, he's conflated the two rules. MRE 401 relevancy and MRE 403, which the court premised its decision on yesterday. The court actually, I think yesterday, I mean, in terms of, the thrust of Mr. Kirkpatrick's argument this morning is that he has additional facts which make it more relevant. The court yesterday found, yeah, I see the relevancy of the defendant's, desire to have this, but the decision, or the opinion of the court came down to 403. And it was well reasoned, and there's been nothing offered this morning to suggest that that reasoning has changed. The danger of the jury confusing the issues between the federal charges and the state charges, which are obviously different, and the individuals involved is different also. In terms of the judge, the argument made of preliminary examination, that judge-based hearing is different than a jury-based hearing. 403, we rely upon the bench to be able to separate the wheat from the chaff. That is not present when we're talking about a jury. So what I would, I guess, offer to the court is the additional facts today that the defendant argues really don't change the analysis from yesterday at all. It certainly doesn't rise to the level of motion for reconsideration. Does the court have any questions for me?
Not off the top of my head.
May I just,
Yes, absolutely.
Your Honor, call a motion for reconsideration, call it a re-request of the court to admit this evidence based upon new information that was found.
Your Honor, I think especially as it pertains to the gang charge, well, to both of them, it's appropriate. I guess if the court is still going to deny the motion, deny the request, which I pray the court does not, because I do believe that it's very important in this case, especially because it goes to the crux, the very elements of the charges, and more specifically, the gang charge, because they've got to get to 5. They don't get to 5 continuous members. They don't get there.
How do you get to the 5?
The board that we have with over 40 people in it. Yeah, I mean, to suggest that we're relying upon that we got to have Caleb Frank, or Dan Harris or Brandon Concertas. That is not accurate factually.
40 people? Your Honor, I've heard of maybe 8, 7, bouncing here, bouncing there. They put this big exhibit up there with all these people. Where are all these people? And that's where they get there? No, they have to put facts and evidence to show that my client was in continuous contact and engaging in training and other issues with this group, with the individual specifically, not 40 people on an exhibit that aren't even, we haven't heard of about any of them.
Well, we heard about a lot more than 5. Yeah.
Well, then I guess that if Your Honor, if you are going to deny my motion, what I would ask of the court is a jury instruction that says, ladies and gentlemen, especially when it involves the gang the gang charge. Ladies and gentlemen, you cannot use Dan Harris or Brandon Concerta as an individual to come to the number 5. And obviously, I would eloquently write that, Your Honor. Because here's what happens, Judge. The jury goes back and deliberates. Well, we got Beaker. He's talking about blowing stuff
what?
up. He's doing
Mr.
this.
Kirkpatrick, I'll take that one under consideration. I'm gonna ask nothing along page or 2 on that issue.
On using or instructing the jury that they
Right.
can't use Brandon Concerta or Dan Harris to include them in the number to get to the number 5 for the gang.
Right.
Thank you, Your Honor.
As far as a special.
Should I start, I should start drafting something now and see, and then get it to the prosecutor?
Judge, I mean, we have to be careful not to invade the province of the jury, okay? And really what he's asked you to do here is he's asked you to rule as a matter of law that they can't be considered part of the gang. Because remember, the gang charge has 2 central themes to it. 1, you're in a gang.
Right.
And 2, you commit another felony. Okay, it's like felony firearm. I mean, and what he's asking you to do here is to invade the province of the jury to decide in terms of their deliberations. You know, like during the June 28th training, for instance, was Dan Harris and Brandon Concerta part of the gang? And I would be loath to agree to a jury instruction that invites the court to invade the province of the jury in a determination of a point of fact.
And Your Honor, I'm sorry, last I knew, a defendant has a fundamental right to a fair trial, period. And this is fundamentally unfair for the prosecutor to stand up here and say
Bring up
this.
your proposed instruction. You respond with the reasons why you think it's not appropriate, and then I'll make a decision after I've read it as to whether it's used or not.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So to be just, the ruling yesterday stands.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Corey, are we ready for the jury? Bring them in.
All rise for the jury.
Please be seated. Johnson.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Morning, Counselor. We spent the last couple days going through some exhibits, correct? Yes, sir. I'm gonna try and take these exhibits in chronological order. I believe the date of occurrence first video from October 13, 2016. That was the video in which Paul was pushing a dummy and fired some shots, correct? Call that video?
I recall the video. Thought it might have been like 2018. but-
Okay. Well, I won't hold you to the day. You may be correct. Pete Musical was not present.
That is correct.
That video was not taken at Muni.
That's correct.
Was Mr. Bellar a member of the Wolverine Watchman Facebook page at that time?
2018, he was not. The Facebook page did not exist at that time.
Exactly. Do you have any idea what he was doing at that time?
Not enough to testify about.
Okay, and I'm sure Mr. Kirkpatrick will get with you on that. Now, 2018, Justice Department, under President Trump, declared bump stocks illegal. Is that correct?
I recall the incident and I just don't know the date.
That made a lot of people in the Second Amendment community upset with the president.
That's fair to say.
As part of this investigation, you reviewed the Facebook account of Mr. Musical.
Yes.
In that Facebook account, there were Facebook posts from 2018.
No, when I did the Facebook search warrant, the duration, I believe I went back 1 year. I don't think I went back to 2018. I think I limited it to January of 2019, but I don't exactly recall the furthest back it went in the Facebook page.
In reviewing those records, did you see any posts in which Mr. Musical said, voted for Trump and all I got was a ban on bump stocks?
I don't recall that, but it's not because it may have happened. I just don't remember that specifically.
In November of 2019, well, let me back up. During this time period, there are memes on Mr. Musical's page about Second Amendment activities.
Yes,
There are memes on his page about tyrannical government.
yes,
These memes, some of them are satire, political satire.
yes, that seems fair.
Some of them are intended as jokes, whether they were funny to you or not, they were intended as jokes.
I
Objection,
can't tell
he
you.
he cannot testify to what is intent
Yeah,
of another
I
person
agree.
is.
Rephrase it.
When you review the Facebook messages, did you see, or the Facebook activity, did you see Mr. Musical referencing memes as jokes?
Means it's not something I specifically recall. I'm not saying it didn't happen. If there's a quote or anything, I'd be happy to review it.
2019, and this is on your significant events timeline, Joe Morrison is convicted of improper transportation of firearm. Is that correct?
I think the significant events timeline is the sentencing, not the conviction, but yes, I agree. That's the first event.
As part of this case, did you review the facts surrounding that arrest?
One of the case agents obtained a police report, and at one period in time, I read the police report.
So you have no information that during the course of that arrest, Joe Morrison fought with the police,
That's correct.
argued with the police?
The police report, my recollection, doesn't discuss whether he argued or not.
And ultimately, he was sentenced to a misdemeanor, correct?
That's correct.
Received credit for the night in jail that he served,
That's correct.
and received a fine, I think it's about $250.
I don't remember the fine amount, but that seems like a fair, accurate description. What?
Are you familiar with the state carrying concealed weapon law?
Generally, as a federal officer, I've never, charged or arrested somebody myself, but I am familiar with the concept.
And so you can comment on whether or not that's a usual plea. Somebody charged with carrying a concealed weapon.
But I would say that would be a very favorable plea for the defendant. So for Joe Morrison, that's a very favorable plea.
There were some memes posted in January that we saw during the presentation, correct?
January of which year?
2020,
Yes,
in February 2020.
yes, sir.
Now, when this Facebook page is started, when you do your historical investigation of Facebook page, the page dictates who created the page, correct?
That's correct.
Pete Musical did not create that page.
That's correct.
The information you got shows who the administrators of that page were.
That's correct.
When the page was initially created, Pete Musical was not an administrator of the Facebook page.
That's correct.
In December, he was not an administrator. In December 2019, he was not an administrator of the Facebook page.
To my knowledge, he was never an administrator.
Well,
of the Facebook page.
we'll get down the line. Just answer my question.
Yes, sir.
In December of 2019, he was not an administrator of that Facebook page.
Correct.
In January 2020, he was not an administrator of that Facebook page. February of 2020, he was not an administrator of that Facebook page.
That's correct.
Based on your review of wire chats and Facebook, members were added to the Facebook page. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Mr. Musical himself was added to the Wolverine Watchman Facebook page.
Yes, that seems accurate.
There are things from the inception of that page to now February that are posted that were not posted by Pete Musical, correct?
Absolutely.
Pete Musical didn't comment on those posts, a lot of them. Is that fair to say?
Well, such a general statement, Pete Musical certainly made comments and there were many posts, so without having a specific post, it's hard to make such a general statement.
The part of the Facebook page that talks about the purpose of the group, you have no information that was authored by Pete Musical.
That's correct.
And even in that purpose of the group, it indicates in there for Mr. Morrison that he's gonna lead the group until maybe somebody more qualified than him comes along. Is that correct?
I don't remember the exact description. I believe we presented it and would refer to the,
Refer to exhibits, please.
can you tell me which exhibit you'd like me to refer to?
It is the Wolverine Watchman main page.
Okay. What I have here is exhibit 3,
Yep.
Facebook business record. And the opening statement is Wolverine Watchman is a group of patriots to network and assemble and recruit like-minded individuals, develop regional QRFs and squad tactics. Only add people you trust, no status, no FUDs, no bootlickers, and no cops or feds.
The next exhibit is to talk about the QRFs and the individual leaders of these QRFs.
So there's 8 pages in exhibit 3, which is the creation of the Facebook. The 8 pages, so it talks generally about generally talks about the establishment of QRFs throughout these 8 pages.
Right. And when it talks about those establishments, the QRFs, Mr. Musical is not listed as a leader of any QRF.
His name is never used specifically as a leader. I think that's a fair statement.
People join that group.
Yes,
People are vetted. And now we're getting into March to join that Wolverine Watchman group.
yes, sir.
In March of 2020, Mr. Musical is not in the vetting chat.
Correct.
In March of 2020, there are 5 Wolverine Watchman chats on Wire. Well, let me read them out for you. There was the Wolverine Watchman main chat that Mr. Musical was in.
Okay,
There was Wolverine Watchman Army chat, which Mr. Musical was in.
okay, that's 2.
There was a Wolverine Watchman vetting chat that Mr. Musical was not in.
Okay, that's 3.
There's the QRF team that Mr. Musical was not in.
Okay, that's 4.
And there was a leadership chat that Mr. Musical was not in.
Okay, that's 5.
You would agree with me on that?
I'd agree there's 5 and Mr. Musico was in 2 and he was not in 3. I do believe there was also a combat medical chat. There was also a memes chat. So, and he was in those. So he was in 4 of the 7 chats that I was aware of in March.
Okay. At some point in March, based on your investigation, individual named Dan finds the Wolverine Watchman page.
That's correct.
He joins the page.
That's correct.
He's vetted.
Don't know to what level he was vetted, but he was asking questions.
He wasn't asked those questions about Mr. Musico.
What questions about Mr. Musico?
He was not asked any questions about Mr. Musico during that process.
Not to my knowledge.
He joined the group. Well, we'll talk to him about why he joined. There's no information that in March of 2020, he was asked if he was okay with being labeled a domestic terrorist in the near future.
I don't believe they were asking that question yet in time.
And based on the questions that he asked and answered, he was admitted into the,
That's correct.
he joined the group.
Yes, sir.
He saw what they were talking about on Wire.
Yes, sir.
Now, based on your investigation, he contacts a friend of his that is a member of law enforcement in the Flint area, Mount Morris.
Yes, sir.
That officer then contacts a sergeant.
Sir.
That sergeant then contacts the FBI.
That sergeant was a part of the FBI. He was a task force officer on our Safe Streets Gang Task Force. And so I worked with them kind of on a day-to-day basis. So yes, that sergeant then came to me as we were working together.
At some point, you contact Dan. And you, Dan, and Agent Chambers all meet.
Yes, sir.
You're shown Dan's cell phone.
Yes, sir.
You take pictures of Dan's cell phone. Now, you indicate what was your concern about this group was the threats to law enforcement.
I was concerned about the concept of the reverse red flag targeting of law enforcement. I was also
Okay,
concerned
let's
about,
stop right there. You said the reverse red flag targeting law enforcement. We've seen the screenshots that were admitted into evidence from Dan's phone, correct?
that's correct.
Where in those screenshots does Mr. Musico or anybody talk about reverse red flags?
I don't think it occurs in any of those screen captures.
Okay. What was your next concern?
Next concern was the illegal weapons and explosives.
At that time, looking at those screenshots, did you have any information that anybody possessed any illegal weapons?
Well, at that time, all I was looking at was discussions of illegal weapons. And I didn't even know who was making the statements at that period in time.
My question to you, sir, at the time you reviewed those screenshots that we saw in the evidence that were admitted into evidence, did you have any evidence that anybody was in possession of illegal weapons?
So when I looked at the screenshots, all I was looking at was statements. I didn't have any evidence of anything. I was just looking at what was being said. And based on the context of what they were talking about, I believed they were talking about getting or having illegal weapons. But I had zero evidence at that period in time. That was the first time I'd known anything about the case. I didn't know who the subjects were. I was just looking at raw chats and discussions from unknown people.
And furthermore, on that day, when you saw those screenshots, Mr. Musico isn't talking about possessing any illegal weapons.
Well, he's talking about possessing explosives, which are illegal weapons.
Now, he's talking about possessing explosives. And that goes to some of those pictures of the anarchist cookbook that you saw in those screenshots from Dan.
There's a reference to tannerite, if memory serves me. And then there's references to using explosives and different detonation distances. But yes, the anarchist cookbook with the household substitutes and everything, that is also what I'm referring to.
Is tannerite illegal?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Matter of fact, go and you can purchase Tannerite, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, we saw an admission as part of those exhibits of anarchist cookbook.
Just for my own edification, what is tannerite used for besides weapons?
Sure. So tannerite is often used for exploding targets. So it's kind of it's a,
No, I mean, on a day-to-day basis, why would somebody, the average person go buy tannerite?
for exploding targets typically.
Oh,
So you'd shoot at a target and it would have this small amount of this high explosive in it. And when it's impacted by the round, the target would,
and you can just buy that?
yeah, yes, sir, you can buy that.
Okay, I was thinking more like a baking soda type thing. It has many other uses. It can be used, and I'm using that as an example. Tannerite doesn't have any other use.
So I'm not sure, but I believe it's restricted to like high quantities. Like you couldn't buy like a barrel of tannerite. It's a high explosive that's regulated. But, targets and, small amounts, I believe you can purchase, but
Okay, because I recognize a number of other items when that came up that would have plenty of reasons around the house, but that one I had no idea. Okay, thank you.
And, based on the judge's question, it's pretty commonplace for people to buy Tannerite and put them in the target, so when you shoot them, they explode.
I think that'd be like a shooting range type thing. So commonplace in, on the range. So to speak.
And just so we set the record clear, Mr. Musical did not own this home in Munich, Michigan, correct?
My knowledge, and I don't know any deals that they'd made stay there. I don't know what they'd worked out for the rental or for purchase. To my knowledge, Joe Morrison had received an inheritance, and then he took that inheritance, about 130,000, and then used that cash to purchase the home. But I don't know about anything else, any deals they would have made for the living arrangement.
And where they lived, shooting on the property was allowed.
I'm not saying it's illegal. I just, I don't know the town ordinances and, if there's houses in the back, I don't know the distance behind the other houses in the community when they were shooting. So, but I'm not trying to say that it's an illegal act.
Now, this case is the first case where FBI agent came across the anarchist cookbook. Is that correct?
I don't know of other cases, but I think it's a fair statement to say that certainly the FBI at other times must have come across the anarchist cookbook.
FBI did a memo on the anarchist cookbook.
I'm not aware of it, but it seems very likely at one time that they did.
Would it surprise you that the FBI said, and I'll quote, on the basis of this review, we have concluded that the book does not urge forcible resistance to any law of the United States. That surprise you?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know where you're getting it, and it's hard without context.
You want to review you want to see where I'm reading from?
Yes, sir.
Can we see that actually before? I mean, we might want to see what witness is being shown.
Let's do blue tag.
Mr. Johnson, can you show us what you wanted to show here?
Oh, yeah. I thought I told you blue tag. Blue tag. Sorry about that. You mind if I read it?
see the papers that come before. Thank you. Does it say 1971?
Yeah. I'm gonna take you right to the quote, but please feel free to review any part.
Okay.
Of this. Yeah, I showed him where the quote, I'm sorry, I showed him where the quote.
Yeah,
I told him he
Oh,
could
I'm
look,
sorry.
review anything
Oh, I'm
else that
sorry.
he thought deemed to be fair.
So I've reviewed this and it does not surprise me, this context.
Okay. Now, to be fair, this is from 1971.
That's correct.
If you, and you were not in the agency.
I was born in 1983.
Did you, so, and it's fair to say that you didn't review the FBI's position on the anarchist, well, let me rephrase that for that. That's not true. Did you review the FBI's position on the anarchist cookbook during your investigation in this case?
This is the first time I've seen any documents from the FBI about the anarchist cookbook.
So now, is it fair to say that Mount Moore's officer who was friends with Dan, his sergeant, you and Agent Chambers saw this alleged conversation about reverse red flags and nobody took a picture of it?
Well, that's not fair to say.
Where's the pic, what part of that is not fair?
I've never seen the conversation. That conversation had auto-deleted by the time that Dan came and met with the FBI. And I don't know about what other officers saw, but by the time it came to the FBI, it had auto-deleted, and I could just see the continuing effects of the conversation, which whatever had not been auto-deleted at that time. Self-delete, this is the self-delete feature of the Wire app.
This is, well, do you know if that feature was activated on the day that those posts were allegedly made?
I know when I saw the Wire, the auto-delete was activated. I don't recall if it was at a 72-hour or a 24-hour or a 48-hour delete period. But I know when I saw it, it was activated. Going back to the post that happened before I saw it, since I didn't see them, I can't tell you what the features were set up.
Did the sergeant that worked with you on this task force tell you, I saw this with my own eyes?
So the sergeant on the task force never met with Dan, so he didn't see anything with his own eyes except for viewing the Facebook page and then providing me the Facebook page that was identified.
Did the Mount Morris police officer that was friends with Dan ever tell you, I saw this with my own eyes?
No, he did not.
Now, we did see into evidence and everybody saw the meme about, look, son, there's a good cop, there's a cemetery that appears to depict tombstones of police officers.
Sir.
Is it fair to say you met with Dan in March twice, March 17th, and then a couple of days later, March 19th?
Yes,
The purpose of having him come back was to try and recruit him to be a confidential research.
well, we tried to recruit him the first day. We pitched him, so to speak, and we encouraged him and gave him our reasoning on why we wanted his help. But yes, the second day was to see if he thought about it, to further vet him out and continue that recruitment.
And at some point, you were discussing the Wolverine Watchman, the early stages of this investigation with Agent Chambers.
Well, I frequently discuss the Watchmen with Agent Chambers throughout the entire investigation.
Now, when Dan goes back, you and Dan work out some investigative techniques, and now you have the ability to observe the Wolverine Watchman chats through his phone or through his account.
So I believe it was March 23rd that he gave us access to his.
So you're able to access the account through your FBI office in Flint, right?
Correct.
And Dan's able to access and do what he needs to do wherever, he resides through his computer and phone.
Yes, sir.
Now, we have, and you reviewed the wire chat logs that Mr. Musical was in March 2023. 2020.
I recall some exhibits, I believe. Yes.
And I'm not just talking about the exhibits, I'm just talking about period.
Oh, yes, yeah. So I did review the main chat, the Armory chat. Those were the ones. And then we didn't really review the meme chat. So I'm not sure about Mr. Musico's communication on the meme chat, but the Armory chat and the main chat.
And you would agree with me that this occurs a couple of weeks after Dan was initially concerned.
I'm sorry, what occurs?
Your access to the chats.
Well, we met with Dan on March 17th for the first time, and then on March 23rd, he provided us access to chats.
And he joined March 7th.
He joined the Facebook page on March 7th. And then the wire chat would have been sometime between March 7th and March 17th when he came in.
And so from March 7th to March 23rd, you would agree with me, that's approximately, 2 weeks, 2 days?
Sure.
Okay. And in your direct examination, there was no exhibit admitted from Pete Musical from the March Wolverine Watchman chat, which he talks about hurting law enforcement.
Wait. So you're saying from March 23rd through the end of the month, did he talk about hurting law enforcement? Is that the?
Yeah, that we saw admitted into evidence.
I believe we admitted some evidence from March 23rd from the main chat and the Armory chat. And I just don't remember if it's specific to hurting law enforcement or the content of those exhibits right now.
Now, April rolls around, correct?
Yes, sir.
Presume you and your partner, Agent Chambers, are talking about this investigation. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir.
And there's other agents involved in this conversation as well. I believe someone by the name of Jenny.
I'm sorry, which conversation are you referring to? I was
Well-
answering, generally speaking, throughout the course of the case, and in April, I spoke to Jason.
Let me ask you this. In April, on or about April 2nd, 2020, was DTOS denied in terms of this investigation?
The DTOS. That's the Domestic Terrorism Operations Section. And I believe I know what you're referring to.
It was denied.
No, I don't think that's correct.
Did Agent Chambers text, "I have pledged to beat them over the head with it until they comply"?
So I'm familiar with Agent Chambers' texts from reviewing Discovery.
Mhm.
I wasn't on those text messages. So if you have them and you're reading them verbatim, I'm not contesting anything you're reading verbatim from Discovery. I just wasn't part of that discussion with Agent Chambers, so I have a hard time testifying myself based on my memory since I don't have what you're reading.
Well, I can present it to you. Did Agent Chambers ever say to you that he was gonna work this as a TEI, whether they give him the paperwork or not? And beyond me, I approach the witness.
Go ahead.
And I'm sorry, let me be brief.
No, you're good. Thank you, sir.
And a TEI is a terrorist enterprise investigation, correct?
That's correct. So I have the text message here and he's never stated this to me, but I'm familiar with the message.
Yeah, yes, sir. Now, is it fair to say March 2020, based on the coronavirus, I'm gonna call it pandemic, I don't know what it was specifically classified at that time, but there was a shutdown regarding the coronavirus pandemic or epidemic, whatever it was classified to at that time.
Yes, there were lockdowns throughout the state.
In April, the Wolverine Watchman spoke about those in chats.
Yes, sir.
They were also doing some trainings that had started in March, and there was going to be some plans for some trainings in April.
Well, I don't know when their training started, when Dan first arrived to the first training on March 22nd, based on our tasking. We were told that there had been 7 previous trainings prior to March 22nd. So I don't know anything about those trainings. So to say that they started in March and went to April, I mean, I don't know when they actually started.
Was the March 22nd training recorded?
No, sir.
Believe at some point there was a training on March 30th as well.
Yes, sir.
March 30th training, the group was spotted by somebody driving in a car.
I believe that was the April 13th training. There was kind of a looky-loo who went by and saw them gathered.
We'll get there later. Okay, so in April, there are a lot of activity and Boog related activity, I think as you described it, on the Facebook page for the Wolverine Watchman.
I believe there was a lot of recruitment of Boogaloo individuals on the Watchman Facebook page.
And is it fair to say you don't subscribe to the theory of the Boogaloo?
Yes, that's fair to say.
All right, so all your opinions on the Boogaloo come from the law enforcement perspective.
I'm certainly I think all my opinions in everything come from the law enforcement perspective.
Now, there is a protest that occurs, and well, there were several protests that occurred in April. One of those protests was at the state capitol.
Yes, sir.
Would the Wolverine Watchmen go to that protest?
Well, they went to some protest. Which one are you referring to?
The protest on April 12th.
There was one on April 15th that they went to, and April 30th that I'm aware of. They may have attended some of their own in between that Dan or the FBI wasn't aware of.
Okay, well, let's go to April 15th, the one Dan was at.
Okay.
On that protest, that was on the Capitol lawn, correct?
Yes, sir.
They went. They complied with the rules and regulations of the protest.
Yes, that seems fair.
Okay. Was there, you had Dan there, correct?
Yes.
At this time, was there any aerial surveillance of the Wolverine Watchmen at the protest?
There was no aerial surveillance specific to the Watchmen, but I did receive information from Michigan State Police helicopters, which were there to help assist with any civil unrest. So it wasn't for the Watchmen. I received it after realizing that the group was present.
So did you see the pictures from the aerial surveillance from Michigan State Police?
Yes, sir.
Group that's in those pictures is that the Wolverine Watchmen?
I couldn't identify them. It's too far away.
Okay. At that protest, obviously the Wolverine Watchmen were yelling.
This protest wasn't recorded, so I couldn't live monitor or hear anything. So you'd have to ask Dan on this one.
We saw pictures that were admitted into evidence of the Wolverine Watchmen at that protest.
No, all the pictures we admitted were from the April 30th protest. The April 15th was, we didn't admit anything from that protest.
Now, after this April 15th protest, people, the Wolverine Watchmen go back home. Is that correct? Well, specifically, Pete Music Hall.
I mean, I suppose, yes, they went home.
There was additional activity on the Facebook page and the wire chats.
Yes, sir.
There was additional complaints about the governor, correct?
That seems fair. I'm not thinking of a specific quote, but generally speaking, there was a lot of complaints about that.
And we get down to April 30th, correct?
Sir?
There's a protest at April 30th, on April 30th.
Yes, sir.
This was a planned protest
Sorry, planned by who?
by the Watchmen. They were going to go to this protest that was occurring on April 30th.
So I think somebody else planned the protest and then the Watchmen went to that protest.
Right. I'm not saying that they actually planned the
Okay.
actual protest, but they planned to go.
Yes, sir.
And what I'm getting at is that wasn't like a bunch of people showed up. You know, there was a planned event that was going to occur that day.
So the Watchmen discussed it on their main chat, and then Joe Morrison put out that they were going to go as the Wolverine Watchmen to the protest, and then whatever members could make it, they talked about who was going to go, and then they planned to go.
Now, at that protest, they start off outside the Capitol.
Yes, sir.
There's, again, aerial surveillance.
I didn't get any photographs from MSP from this instance, but I do believe they may have had a Trooper 1 in the air.
Wolverine Watchmen take pictures of themselves outside the Capitol on that day.
That seems, yes. I think I recall seeing some pictures outside. Yes.
some point, the protesters are allowed inside the Capitol,
Yes, sir.
and there's a protocol that they have to follow. Correct?
That's my understanding. Yes.
Most importantly, they're armed. That fair to say?
I mean, they're armed. I don't know. To me, it's not being armed. That's the most important thing. It's the intention to disrupt the conduct of government at the time. So I guess I disagree with that statement.
They're armed,
Yes,
right?
sir.
They line up, correct? To enter the Capitol.
And so I wasn't watching it personally, but it seems consistent with what I've heard.
We've seen the video from Adam Fox, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so, and you were monitoring this event through the devices that you provided there.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so there's a line. In the line, they have to get the temperature taken.
Seems accurate. Yes.
They get admitted into the Capitol.
Yes, sir.
Who protests?
Sir.
Whether it's marching down the street blocking traffic or going into the Capitol, protests disrupt government. Is that fair to say?
Well, some protests can disrupt government, other protests don't. So I think it's fair to say that some of them do, yes.
While they're in the Capitol, they go through the Capitol, correct?
Yes,
As part of this protest.
yes, sir.
There's and we've seen the photograph, there's at some point, there's a line of state troopers and people in the back that I presume to be some sort of Capitol security or ushers.
Yes, sir.
We see the photograph of Mr. Musical and the Wolverine watch members that he's with up at the line. And, you know, the photograph that we had some argument about was him holding the cell phone, correct?
Yes, sir.
You weren't there, but based on the review of the recording and the picture, the purpose of the state police standing in that line was to say, hey, you can't come any further than this.
Yes,
Right.
I think that's fair.
Did Pete Musical attempt to go any further than he was allowed on that day?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. We talked about, and there was some discussion about whether or not he had took a picture of a state trooper's name, correct?
Correct.
Throughout the course of this investigation, you executed a search warrant, not only on his, the residence in which he resided, his phone and his social media activity, correct?
Correct.
Did you find any picture of any state trooper's name?
No, sir.
Did you find any names or addresses of any law enforcement agents?
No.
Did you find any evidence of this supposed Xtel app that allows you to download addresses of law enforcement?
I'm not sure about that. I had another agent that was tasked with reviewing the phone,
Mhm.
and I don't know if he would have found that or not.
Okay. Did that agent ever tell you, hey, Pete Musical had the address of this law enforcement agent?
He did not.
There was a lot of media at this event as well, correct?
Yes, sir.
And some of the exhibits that we have into evidence were actually photographs that were taken from various media outlets, correct?
Yes,
Nobody from the Wolverine Watchmen was arrested on that day.
that's correct.
There was no photograph, video, or recording of any member of the Wolverine Watchmen, specifically Mr. Musical, committing any crime on that day.
Well, criminal activity, part of it's based on your intent. So I'd have a hard time knowing his intentions that day. I wasn't in his head. So there's certainly a number of other crimes that he could have occurred based on his intentions.
You actually warned Michigan State Police that this group was coming,
Yes, sir.
and they were paying special attention to this group. Is that fair to say?
I can't testify
can't
about
speak.
what they were doing.
You have no information that state police had to interact with or restrain any member of the Wolverine Watchmen that day, do you?
Well, I know they definitely interacted with the watchmen, but they did not restrain them.
And there was other protests. I think that there was the barbershop protest that the Wolverine Watchmen went to as well, correct?
Operation Haircut,
That was in May.
I believe so.
Okay. So now into May, Wolverine Watchmen are still adding members, correct?
Sure.
Now, in April, Mr. Musical still was not in the betting chat.
That's correct.
He was not in the leadership chat.
I believe in April, Joe Morrison added him to the leadership chat for a period of time to discuss fundraising and then removed him from the leadership chat.
That was one day, correct?
Yes,
He went into the leadership chat and his suggestion was that they pool funds together so people who couldn't afford ammunition could buy ammunition. Something to that effect.
yes.
That idea was rejected.
No, I don't think so. It was discussed frequently and then, later Ty Garbin came up with a plan for pooling funds.
And then Mr. Musical was put back out of the leadership chat.
Yes, sir. Same day.
Now, we go to May. There's some trainings that occur in May.
Yes,
There's the barbershop protest that the Wolverine Watchmen go to.
yes, sir.
Does Dan go to that protest?
Yes. I guess the one I'm thinking of is May 14th, Dan goes. I think that's the barbershop one. I'm not sure.
Not gonna hold you to the date, but we agree that there was a barbershop protest 2 years ago at the Capitol.
Yes,
The
sir.
Wolverine Watchmen went.
Yes, sir.
All right. And Dan was recording.
Yes,
State police were there.
yes,
The intent on that day of the protest were barbers gonna cut hair in defiance of one of the shutdown orders that was in support of this Owasso barber. Is
I think
fair to
that was,
say?
yeah, I think that was part of the concept.
The state police actually issued tickets to barbers on that day.
I don't know if it was at the protest or not. I believe there were some tickets issued and maybe that was in Owasso or maybe at the Capitol. I don't know. I heard rumors of tickets being issued. I think it might have been in Owasso, and not at the state.
There was and that's fair. But you agree with me that there was state police there,
Yes,
Wolverine Watchmen were there.
yes,
No issues between the state police and the Wolverine Watchmen.
that's correct.
Now, in May, I think we now have introduced this new character, Barry Croft. Is that fair to say? Some of the Barry Croft videos.
Yes, we've brought them into the case here.
Videos that Barry Croft are uploading. Mr. Musical comments on some of those videos.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and we see more meme posting in May as well. Is that fair to say?
I'd say March and April were heavy in meme posting, and then once they got to May, that was the shift in focus where they stopped posting as many memes.
Now, well, in May, the shepherd must protect his flock meme was posted.
That was a propaganda caption photo, so that's not a meme.
Propaganda caption photo. There's continued, recruitment and vetting in May, correct?
Correct.
Now, in May, we have still the Wolverine Watchmen main chat. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Pete Musical's in that chat.
Yes, sir.
We have the Wolverine Watchmen leadership chat.
Correct.
Pete Musical's not in that chat.
That's correct.
We have the Wolverine Watchmen vetting chat.
That's correct.
Members are being vetted throughout the month of May, correct?
Yes, sir.
And after the April protests in which they got nationwide attention, the group started to see an influx of new potential members. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir.
There was a lot of vetting in May.
Yes, sir.
There was a council group conversation in May as well, correct?
I thought the council conversations occurred later. I think the council was a renamed leadership chat after some members had left. That was my memory, but
May 5th, 2020, the council, Boogaloo Bunyan, Dave Norris, Doc 1776, Gunny, Lewis, and you. And you wouldn't be you would be Dan.
okay,
Okay, does that refresh your recollection?
that seems fair.
Pete Musical wasn't part of that.
Correct. He was never part of the council chats. I know that.
There was the scanners, comms, live feeds of May 2020 chat as well.
Yes, sir.
Pete Musical was in that chat.
Yes, sir.
Purpose of that chat was to discuss and listen in on the nationwide protests that were going on in regards to police brutality.
Yes.
And during this time, Barry Croft was also posting videos,
Yes,
correct?
sir. Yes.
And in one of the videos that we saw during your direct examination, Barry Croft makes a statement, "They keep killing us." Remember that?
Yes.
That was the day after protests erupted in regards to Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. Is that fair to say?
Seems fair. I don't recall the exact dates, but it certainly seems like a fair statement.
There was a QRF chat in May.
Yes, sir.
The Musical was not part of the QRF chat.
That's correct.
There was another protest chat in May. Protest May chat group is what I'm gonna call it.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Musical was in that chat group.
Yes, he was.
Okay. And the purpose of that chat group was to discuss protests that were occurring and who was gonna go and all those things.
Yes.
That's different than the QRF chat group.
Correct.
And then Dan starts having private conversations with individual members, correct?
I mean, he had them throughout the course of the investigation. I wouldn't be able to tell you when it started. Probably before that it started.
And that's via text
Um,
or wire.
Some of them were Facebook Messenger, some were wire, some were text message, some were in person.
Now, in May, they're also training as well, correct?
Yes.
During May, during the trainings, there starts to be some dissension in the group.
I'm not recalling a specific incident. I know there later became dissension, so I don't know if it had been maybe starting around that time. I don't know if there's something specific you have in mind.
Well, you reviewed the chats for May, correct?
Yes.
Is it true that in May, Doc 1776 says, "Hey guys, I've got a serious question to ask. I've had some people from the group, multiple honestly, asking if we should make a new group on the down low without Joe and Pete. Some guys would like to go discreet and not have to deal with protests and becoming easier targets for the government, which I don't blame them."
Yes, I recall that, and I do recall that being earlier on. I think May is fair.
Well, would you like to see the exact date? But is it fair to say May 1st?
I don't have the quote. It seems fair. I recall it being early on, much earlier before he started the ghost group. I remember hearing the rumbling, so I think it's a.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting that after that conversation, the group broke up. Okay. Now, at this point, the trainings in May, are they recorded?
Yes.
During the May trainings, there's what's called dry fire, where guns aren't actually shot, correct?
Correct.
There's some live fire in which guns are actually shot.
Yes.
there are some, different training tactics, correct?
Correct.
Training tactics that are specific to urban combat.
I think that's fair.
And during this time, we are seeing, and they are discussing in the protest chat, not just the peaceful, but the violent protests that are occurring around the country.
Yes, sir.
And I know Mr. Kirkpatrick talked about that. I think he's gonna go into a lot more detail on those, but I think we referenced Portland, is that correct?
Yes.
Seattle specifically,
Yes, sir.
and I think Detroit, we referenced specifically.
Certainly Minneapolis, St. Paul
And
area.
Minneapolis, I was gonna leave them for last. That was the biggest, right?
Yes.
Minneapolis, and it's what we talked about. You gave the information about police departments being firebound.
Yes, sir.
And I believe that police department actually relocated. They went somewhere else, correct?
Seems fair.
And we talked about Chaz, the autonomous group that was set up somewhere in Seattle. I'm not going to specifically say downtown. I'm not from Seattle, but you
Yes.
know what I'm talking to.
I do know what you're talking about.
Okay. Now, during this time, we saw the Wolverine Watchman flag that they had that was admitted into evidence. Is that correct?
I know what you're referring to. It wasn't admitted here, but it was used in our preliminary exam.
Okay. Well, no. I'm gonna get to that flag.
Oh,
There was another flag that was admitted in today's hearing. I mean, in today's
yesterday.
trial, it was
okay.
a couple days ago, but it was the flag without the names.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this bump, the sticker on the back of their truck.
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
Okay. Eventually, names are added to that flag.
I don't know the order, but I know the flag with names added that you're referring to.
Yeah, I'm not gonna ask you about the order of the names or how they occurred, but some of the names on that flag were Breonna Taylor,
Yes, sir.
Eric Gardner,
Yes, sir.
Oscar Grant,
Yes.
Robert Finnegan.
Yes.
These were all individuals that were killed by police officers.
Yes.
I believe all of the names on the flag, those individuals were, at least at that time, believed to be unarmed.
No,
Okay. Breonna Taylor was armed.
she was not.
Oscar Grant was armed. Well, he wasn't armed.
He was handcuffed when it occurred in 2009.
Okay. And that was the one they think was Michael B. Jordan made the movie about.
Oscar Grant was a 22-year-old black male who was shot in Fullerton in 2009. I don't know about movies.
Okay. Eric Gardner.
He was unarmed.
Okay. And I'm thinking we're gonna put the flag up later, and so we'll go through the entire flag. But is your testimony that some of those individuals were armed,
Yes, sir.
but not the ones we named?
Some of the ones you named were armed. They were involved in altercations with law enforcement when the deaths occurred.
Who was armed?
Robert Lavoie Finicum was
Finicum.
armed during a
Standoff.
standoff with law enforcement.
Now, in late May, the QRF goes down to Detroit
Yes,
to a protest, correct?
yes,
You have Dan Drive.
yes,
Dan is recording.
yes,
You are monitoring
yes.
as they drive down. At some point, a state trooper gets behind the truck.
I don't know about that.
Okay. They get down to Detroit.
Yes,
They go to the Masonic Temple.
yes,
And we heard testimony that that's downtown.
yes.
Is it downtown or is it in the Cass corridor in Midtown? If you know the difference.
I guess I don't know the differentiation between Midtown and downtown. It's right off Michigan Ave, near like the Rosa Parks bus terminal. I think it's in that general area.
They park
Yes,
and they sit in the car, correct? Ty Garvin observes flight patterns of helicopters
Yes,
and they're monitoring what's happening in the protests. That's correct?
yeah, I think that's fair to say, yes.
Now, we heard about this comment that I think Mr. Ballard is alleged to have made, in which he says something to the effect of, if I see officers start shooting civilians, I'm gonna shoot those officers.
Yes,
And he was referring to officers shooting unarmed people.
I don't know what he was thinking about as he was thinking about shooting the police.
Well, he was thinking about defending people.
Is what he said.
Now, he doesn't engage, and nobody in that QRF engages any law enforcement that day.
Correct.
And I think Mr. Kirkpatrick's gonna get a lot more detail into that than I am. But Mr. Musico was not there.
That's correct.
So although we saw that exhibit of the flyer you put out to law enforcement to be on the lookout, it included Mr. Musico.
Yes.
Correct. Not only was Mr. Musico not there, he's not in the QRF chat. Correct.
That's correct.
And based on the QRF chat records, wasn't even in the conversations about going.
That's correct.
Okay.
Before you ask your next question, it's 10:30. We'll take a break, go after the break until noon.
All rise for the jury.
A lot different doing this. Doing the 15 exam. I only have 4 entries.
Hey, we'll see everybody back here in 10-15 minutes.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, Judge. It's a lot different. I said it's a lot different. Now I got my new keyboard and I'm not even typing.
Just admit the flag. I just want to jury vote.
Tired.
That you were gonna ask him about.
I did. We got this. Flag was name is what?
That's all you were gonna.
Somewhere in here, I knew it, and I was watching, make sure nobody took it out.
I was eyeballing it. Making sure.
Okay, well.
My key.
No, I'm not.
No,
No,
the
it
flag
was
is a
a,
post, it's a post from Facebook. That Mr. Musico did, or Mr. Morrison.
I think it's Mr. Morrison. Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta lay the foundation and all that.
I'll print it out.
And then that way,
Yeah.
I'll do that, because we were gonna do it through Dan, but,
okay.
you know, it doesn't matter to me.
Yeah,
I don't wanna talk too much about his client.
Right.
It was funny because my son was friends with
Yeah, you told me.
brother, yeah. And he came home Saturday night from Zach's house with him. He says, so Zach, you haven't told me.
Mr. Corey.
Oh, yeah.
I'm doing well.
You have a good
How about you?
weekend?
I did, man. I did. Took my grandkids to the cider mill.
Oh, nice.
Almost got lost in a corn maze.
What cider mill did you go to?
The one down there in Cement City, Berkeley.
Oh, yeah.
If you want. Jim, you go to a cider mill, you get a donut and a cup of cider. You don't come home with a sack of donuts and a gallon of cider.
That's what we come home with. We bought 2 dozen donuts and out of 11 people that were there, I mean, obviously a donut or two.
Well, yeah,
Big-
see, that's okay, but there's me
Hey.
and my husband and TJ that live in the house.
Right, right.
And I don't eat donuts.
Okay,
I just never have.
right.
Please be seated. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Johnson.
Yes, Your Honor. Okay, sir, as Dan is leaving well, after Dan leaves this QRF, and this Detroit, police brutality protest, well, first, in response to that, we heard on direct examination that, the individuals that went down were not from Detroit. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And I believe that they were referred to as outside agitators on direct examination. Remember that?
I think that's fair, yes.
You think people should be able to care about police brutality no matter where they live?
Absolutely.
I think you testified that your office is in Flint.
Yes,
So that's not in Jackson County.
that's correct.
The Attorney General's office is where?
They've got one in Lansing and in Detroit that I'm aware of.
None of those two locations are in Jackson County, correct?
That's correct.
And these two specifically, their office is in Detroit.
Yes,
That's not in Jackson County.
correct.
Now, on the way back, or not the way back, I'm saying the way back, Dan is debriefed after this protest in Detroit, correct?
Yes,
You talked to him and you and Agent Chambers were involved in this conversation, correct?
you're talking about a specific debrief?
Yes,
After-
there was one that day.
I'm trying to remember, because on May 30th, it went into past midnight. So I think by the time Dan had dropped people off and came back up to Flint, it was like 2 or 3 a.m. And I don't know if we met with him that day or let him get a couple hours of sleep. Because then the next protest, the next QRF was on the night of the 31st in Flint. And so I think it was the next day that we debriefed him after he had some few hours of sleep.
Okay, that's fine. So I'm not gonna hold you to those exactly these conversations took place. But the behavior of Paul was discussed, correct?
Yes,
It's true that Dan said that Paul was completely different when he was there than he was on the way down.
I don't recall that statement. He may have made it, but it wouldn't have stood out.
Remember Dan making a statement to you, well, during the debrief, that these guys had no plan, it was kind of like a waste of time.
I don't remember the waste of time part, but I remember asking him, like, where was their line in the sand? When were they gonna shoot cops? And I remember him not knowing. He didn't know, where that line in the sand would be.
Now, on this day, around this 30th day, there's alleged to have been some communication with Barry Croft, correct? Through Facebook.
Between who?
Mr. Musico and Mr. Croft. Okay, and we saw the timeline of all those communications, correct?
Yes.
Some of those communications we have and some we don't.
Yes.
Okay. And a lot of those communications, as we've seen from some of the exhibits, Pete Musico puts Bible verses or prayers.
Yes.
Okay. And he said some of those things to Dan as well.
Yes.
And to Adam Fox.
Yes.
That was something that he commonly did.
Yes.
Now, June 3rd, there is a leadership meeting.
Yes.
Is it fair to say in June, there are still multiple chats that are on the Wire platform?
Yes.
There is a Wolverine Watchman main chat
Yes,
that Mr. Musical is involved in.
yes,
There is a vetting chat.
yes,
The Musical is not in the vetting chat.
correct.
There are several people that are vetted in June.
Yes,
There's a scanners, comms, and live feed chat still.
yes,
And those are now monitoring the protests. And now we get to Minneapolis, because I think now the George Floyd protest has now started up, correct?
yes,
Mr. Musical is in that chat.
yes,
There's a QRF chat for June.
yes,
Mr. Musical is not in that chat.
that's correct.
There's a protest chat for June.
Yes,
Mr. Musical is in that chat.
yes,
There's a leadership chat for June.
that's correct.
Mr. Musical is not in that chat.
That's correct.
There's a chat called Classes, June 22,
Correct.
June 20.
Correct.
And that was for carrying concealed pistol license classes.
I
And
remember-
I'm asking, I'm not.
Yeah, one member of the Wolverine Watchman wanted to, and I don't remember his name. He wanted to start having dedicated classes, I think for like pistol, medical. He wanted to more of like a YouTube video, like classroom setting where everybody could zoom in and interact, I believe. And he tried to set it up and I think it lasted a day or two.
Mr. Musical wasn't part of that.
I don't remember if he was on it, but if he was, it would be insignificant.
Okay. Well, with the names, Boot Daddy Bunyan, Gunny, Leroy Jenkins, Leroy Moody, and you, again, you being Dan, would that sound about right?
It sounds, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't contest it. I don't have in front of me, but it seems fair.
And there was an Armory chat in June,
Yes,
and Mr. Musical was in that chat.
yes,
Now, in June, there is a discussion at what is described, I guess we'll just go ahead and call it the leadership meeting, correct?
yes, June 3rd at Ty Garvin's house.
Up until that point, there was no official leadership structure for the Wolverine Watchmen.
It wasn't written down. I mean, they certainly had a hierarchy based on how the group was run, but it wasn't formalized. I think it'd be the way I describe it.
At that meeting, there's a discussion as to who the CO or commanding officer should be.
Yes,
Correct? And in the recording, we can hear somebody shout out Dan.
that was Paul Bellard, who
Right.
suggested Dan.
Okay, and you're not there, correct?
I'm not there. I'm live monitoring.
But in the live monitoring, just audio is not video.
Correct.
So you can't see whether or not everybody else is nodding their heads or raising their hand in affirmation of Dan.
Correct. All I can tell you is what you can hear over the audio.
Okay. And then Dan says, no, I can't do it. And he starts talking about his social media presence not being strong.
Yes, that's fair.
But the real reason is because he was a confidential human source for the FBI.
I certainly told him he was not allowed to direct things. So I hope that was part of his decision making.
At this point, Dan had been going to the trainings at MUNA from March, April, May, and June. Well, excuse me, there was no training in June at the time of this meeting, correct?
Correct that. Yes, this was June 3rd. So
Do you know how many trainings Dan had been to prior to this suggestion?
there's March 22nd, March 30th, April 13th, they showed up, and that's when the lady drove by and then they left. So I don't know if you want to count that one or not.
Well, not because we agreed the training was canceled on that day.
They grouped up, they talked. I don't know if they got to do anything. I don't think they did the tactical training. I think they just met and then left. April 19th, there was a training. Then I believe we got into May. There was one on May 17th. So I think that around 5 trainings that Dan would have been to by the time of the leadership meeting.
And as you testified, there was a unofficial rank structure before it was formalized, correct?
I was talking about how the group was ran. Yeah, so certainly the group was running. It was functioning fairly similar to how it functioned after they formalized the rank structure.
And prior to the official declaration of leadership titles, is it fair to say that Dan at least took part in leading some of the trainings up until that point?
He certainly was a member of the leadership group, and he certainly was part of the trainings. He instructed weapons handling, definitely.
Now, Dan does not accept this invitation or this result of this discussion to be the leader. And then Joe accepts the responsibility of being commanding officer, and Dan is XO.
That's correct.
Okay. And these are military style rank structures.
Military or gang.
Now, when Dan is suggested to be, and I'm gonna use the term nominated, and I agree he turns it down. When he's nominated to be the leader, what is talked about is the fact that he's actually done this before, and that was in reference to his military service.
Yeah, so Paul Bellar stated that he had real combat experience when Paul Bellar suggested that Dan be the leader.
And again, Mr. Musico was not present at this meeting.
That's correct.
In this conversation, or at this meeting, Dublin is brought up, correct?
Yes.
And Dublin is brought up by Barry Croft. Excuse me, well, it is brought up that Barry Croft has extended an invitation to Joe Morrison to come down to Dublin.
So they brought up, at that time, they didn't use the word Barry Croft, but they brought up who we later came to learn as Barry Croft.
Right, and this is, and I agree with you, you have no knowledge about this at this time.
Correct.
But in the actuality, through the course of the investigation, you learned that Barry Croft extended this invitation to Dublin.
Yes.
That Barry Croft had been under investigation by the FBI.
That's correct.
That Steve Roberson was a confidential informant for the FBI at that time.
I learned that later, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that there was a Jenny, a confidential informant out of Tennessee, who had also been in contact with Barry Croft.
Yes.
And there was this invitation to come down to Dublin, correct?
Yes.
The location in Dublin that they were meeting was a hotel.
Yes.
That hotel was acquired and paid for by Steve Roberson.
I don't know about that.
Okay. That wasn't important to your investigation?
Well, I don't have access to that information. I think it could be important, but I don't know the answer.
I would suggest that it was, but if you think it is, but regardless, these are now the characters that have now been introduced in terms of the chronological events of this investigation or this occurrence in 2020.
I mean, those characters were involved with the Barry Croft investigation.
So Barry Croft does wind up going to Dublin.
Correct.
Steve Robeson goes to Dublin.
Yes.
Jenny, the CHS out of Tennessee, goes to Dublin.
Yes.
Members of the Wolverine Watchmen do not go to Dublin.
Correct.
Adam Fox goes to Dublin.
Yes.
At this point, there's no evidence or that the Wolverine Watchmen knew Adam Fox was going to Dublin.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
Okay. Barry Croft and Adam Fox appear to meet in Dublin.
Yes.
There's some conversations between Barry Croft and Adam Fox in which he indicates that he is sending Croft some people from Michigan.
Yes.
At this time, there's nothing to indicate that Barry Croft has ever met in person any member of the Wolverine Watchmen.
That's correct.
There are communications that, the evidence suggests there are communications between members of the Wolverine Watchmen and Barry Croft prior to this Dublin meeting on June 6th, correct?
And Your Honor, I hate to object to defense, but we got three of them here. I need a little tighter they as far as communicating with Mr. Croft, who it is specifically.
There's no information that Pete Musical, and I'm gonna keep all my questions regarding Pete Musical.
Okay.
There's information that he may have been in contact with Barry Croft before this June 6th Dublin meeting, correct?
There's information he was in contact, yes.
Okay. Some of those conversations we have, some we don't.
Correct.
Okay. He never says that he's going to Dublin. Pete Musical never says he's going to Dublin.
That's correct.
In Dublin, how many people are in Dublin, if you know?
Say 13 to 15 range.
Out of those 13 to 15, how many of them, well, let me strike that. So, those 13 to 15, at least 5 were assets of the FBI. Is that fair to say?
I'd say at least 3. I know there was another member who's a representative who became a source. He got scared about what was said at Dublin. I just don't know when he became a source.
Okay. So at that time of the meeting, there was 3 sources of the FBI.
Let me think here. Yes, I think that's fair.
Okay. And you agree with me that that meeting was run by Steve Roberson?
I would disagree with that. He
This
certainly
meeting-
was involved.
Pardon me?
He certainly was involved.
Okay. This meeting was recorded, correct?
Yes.
Didn't Steve Roberson call to order the meeting and do a roll call of attendees?
Yes, I think he did a prayer as well.
And then Jeremy Davis spoke.
Jeremy Dieter.
Dieter, is that correct?
Yes, Jeremy Dieter spoke at the meeting.
Steve Roberson at this meeting said, and I'm quoting here, you can't take brick and mortar without taking a bite. Remember that quote?
I thought that was Adam Fox.
I'm sorry. No, yeah, Adam Fox says it at a 16-minute mark, but a minute and 15 seconds before that, Steve Roberson says it. I know it was long.
I don't recall Steve Roberson ever saying that. There was a lot of people talking over one another at various times during the meeting. I did listen to the whole meeting and transcribe a decent portion of it, but I just don't recall Steve Roberson himself saying that. That would have been something that would have really stuck out to me.
Adam Fox speaks at this meeting as well.
Yes.
Group orders pizza from Pizza Hut, correct?
I actually don't know about that. I'm not disputing it. I just didn't know that they ordered pizza from Pizza Hut.
And well, at some point while eating pizza, does Robeson talk about the type of training that they do in Wisconsin?
I don't know about the pizza part, and I believe there is a reference to their annual training in Wisconsin. I don't recall the specifics of what was said about it.
That's, you know, and none of these people here, right? Okay, yeah. So, but you got to the point I was gonna get to. The Cambridge, Wisconsin training, based on what was said in Dublin, Ohio, is an annual thing.
So that's my understanding. The Wisconsin 3%ers will do training regularly, and they often have a large summer training.
Now, I'll follow your lead because, you know, I was gonna get to that, but you got into it. The Wisconsin 3%ers is a group that Steve Robeson claimed to be affiliated with.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Barry Croft had a group that he claimed to be affiliated with, and that was the Second Continental Army.
Yes.
How many members did he have on the date of the Dublin, Ohio meeting?
He had quite a few followers and quite a few people that were, I believe he thought he had their allegiance. I don't know. I couldn't give you a number. I believe he thought his number was probably
a lot bigger than what it actually was, right?
I think that's fair.
Because you have no evidence to suggest that Barry Croft ever had any trainings.
I believe he did travel quite frequently to other militia areas, and I don't have any specific evidence, but I think it's fair to say he did train.
Right, but he didn't host them, is what I'm saying, that you know of.
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't know.
And the two people that he thought were loyal to him that he brought to Dublin were both feds. Well, confidential human sources, I'll say that.
Well, I think he pretty much brought everybody together in the room. So I'd say.
I'm talking about who he traveled there with, who he came there with to Dublin.
I don't know who he traveled to Dublin with.
He was invited there by Steve Robeson, correct?
I don't know. I saw him sending out invites and him talking about the hotel rooms. I don't know how Barry Croft coordinated logistics. He may have talked to Steve Robeson. I just don't have those details.
And Jenny, the confidential human source out of Tennessee, went to Dublin.
Yes, sir.
And she went because of Barry Croft.
I think that's accurate. She was tasked to go to Dublin and to see what the meeting was about. Because of the Barry Croft investigation.
After after this meeting in Dublin, Ohio, Adam Fox is nominated by Steve Robeson to be head of the Michigan 3%ers.
We'll kind of break that into parts. I wouldn't use the term nomination. So I think Adam Fox is announced with his position. He's granted the position of the commander of the Michigan Regiment of the Second Continental Army is how it was described. And I believe Barry Croft made that determination, but I am aware that Steve Robeson made a post online saying that Adam Fox had been named the Michigan commander.
Okay. And that Michigan group had a Facebook page eventually set up?
Well, I know there came to be a Michigan Patriot 3%er Facebook page that was set up.
And that was set up by Jenny, the confidential human source out of Tennessee.
I think that's accurate.
Now, after this meeting in Dublin, we saw the Facebook voice messages that were sent from Adam Fox to Joe Morrison.
Yes, sir.
And, you know, of that is they're saying, hey, Barry Croft says we have something in common. We must have something in common. Correct?
Yes.
The message does not say what the two have in common.
correct.
Okay, but at this point, we know that there have been talks in the group in terms of Wolverine Watchmen about being pro 2A,
Yes,
about being pro liberty,
yes,
hating who they believe to be tyrannical governors.
yes,
There was a lot of talk about Virginia and the governor of Virginia, correct?
correct.
That was in reference to some red flag laws that have been passed.
I don't know about what actually happened in Virginia, but I think they believed there was gonna be
Yeah.
some red flag.
That's fair. They believe, yeah, I don't want to speak for the state of Virginia.
Yeah,
And they believe that military style training was going to be banned in Virginia.
I think that was part of the discussion, yes.
Okay. There had been discussions about arresting or getting a citizen's arrest of the governor at this point,
Which governor?
the governor of Michigan.
And I'm sorry, who are we saying is involved in these
Oh,
discussions?
Mr. Musical.
And are we at like Dublin timeframe?
Yes.
Yes, yes, Mr. Musico had talked about arresting the governor.
With a warrant.
Yes,
Okay. Yeah, well, we're not talking about how realistic that would have been for a judge to sign it, but that's the actual statement that was made.
the Watchmen talked about how it wasn't realistic and they would be charged with kidnapping if that occurred.
Exactly. All right. Now, there's discussion, and I guess starting on the 12th, about Adam Fox training with the Wolverine Watchmen.
June 12th?
Yeah, starting June 12th.
Yes,
Okay. They're talking about it, and they're, I guess, vetting, both people are vetting each other, both entities are vetting each other.
seems fair.
Right? Adam Fox is vetting the Wolverine Watchmen, the Wolverine Watchmen are vetting Adam Fox.
Yes,
There's a talk, and I believe it's the June 13th, where it's talking about what time on Sunday, and I'm referencing a Fox message to Mr. Musical, what time on Sunday, because I have another 12-hour day tomorrow, and I won't be home until like 9:30 tomorrow night. You recall that?
yes,
Okay. And you believe, and you believe, the what time on Sunday, these referencing training.
correct.
Okay. Mr. Musical does not specifically invite Adam Fox to train.
Well, I believe he does, but in that statement you read, you can just read the statement. It is what it is.
Okay. And the Wolverine Watchmen, we have talked about they're going through this vetting process, correct?
Your Honor, I want clarification.
Okay.
When we're talking about the Wolverine Watchmen, we have 3 here. I'm asking for names.
Well,
Who's doing the vetting here of Adam Fox?
Okay.
Adam Fox is being discussed in the vetting chat.
No, these are one-on-one direct messages between Pete Musico and Adam Fox.
Well, yeah, the exhibit I just read, but in terms of Mr. Kirkpatrick's objection,
No, he's not discussed in the vetting chat.
right. And so these conversations have nothing to do with Paul Ballard.
Correct.
Now, there is a phone call that involves training in which is Joe Morrison, Adam Fox, and Dan are on this phone call. This occurs on June 14th, 2020.
Yes, I recall that.
All right. Mr. Morrison says, at least we can use Thursday to, kind of get to know each other a little bit, break the ice type shit.
I recall that statement.
Adam Fox says, absolutely, man. And then, I wouldn't mind getting out and doing some training with you guys. And then if you guys are on board, we'll head out to Steve's compound. You guys can come out there for the little FTX shoot with us. Dan says, yeah, 100%. Morrison says, I'd be cool with that.
I think that's accurate to how I recall that phone conversation happening.
Based on that transcript, wouldn't mind getting together and doing some training with you guys is what Adam Fox says.
Yes,
There's no detail as to what that training is going to be for in that conversation, correct?
they don't explicitly state it, but they certainly discuss their common goals and their intentions as far as going after the Capitol. But they don't say like going after the training is going to go after the Capitol. It doesn't happen like in that sequence.
Well, let's pause there because there was some talk by Adam Fox about storming the Capitol.
Yes,
But that occurs at the April 30th rally.
so after the April 30th rally, Adam Fox talked to Pete Musico and he talked about how everybody's accusing us of storming the Capitol, but we're actually going to do it. Not like just going in, single file. That's what he told Pete Musico.
Exactly. And Mr. Musical said that's not a good idea.
I don't think he said that.
You don't think that the idea of storming the Capitol was rejected by the Wolverine Watchmen?
The Wolverine Watchmen certainly did not like the idea of storming the Capitol. I do agree that Pete Musico thought that was a fishbowl. That's the term he used, and that they wouldn't be able to survive the attack.
Okay. Now, there is a training that occurs on the 14th of June in Munich, correct?
Yes,
Adam Fox is not there.
correct.
Adam Fox sends he has sent a voice message that is shared amongst the group.
Yes,
That voice message was an invitation for people to come to Grand Rapids, to the back shack, where he worked and sometimes lived off and on, to discuss common goals.
yes.
Your Honor, I guess again, I'd want some clarification on who's they that heard this message from the Watchman.
Mr. Johnson, go ahead.
Yep. Mr. Villar was not a part of this conversation.
So Mr. Villar was individually sent that same message from Joe Morrison. Joe Morrison sent that message on Facebook to members of the group, and he told members on Wire that he'd sent the message on Facebook. And then he individually sent the message to Paul Villar on Facebook.
Now, there's a conversation that's recorded between Dan, Pete, and Joe Morrison about this invitation.
Sorry, between Dan, Pete, Joe Morrison. What date are you referring to?
June 14th, 2020 at the Munich training.
Okay, yes, I recall this.
Now, and this is reference to an exhibit that was admitted into evidence. Dan and Pete are talking, correct?
Yes,
And Dan says, I'm down for going.
yes,
This is the guy who, at the leadership meeting, was the first person suggested to lead the group.
yes,
Okay. Pete Musical says, huh? Correct?
yes,
Dan says, I'm down for going. He says it again.
yes.
Pete Musical says, are you?
I don't. If you can point me to the transcript, it sounds like you're reading it. It sounds
May I
accurate.
approach the witness?
116T. All right, I have it here. If you need the rest of it to read.
Yes, sir. May I approach the witness?
That's what-
Yep.
So we got down to the fourth line. You agree that that's the nature of the conversation at this point?
Yes, it's an accurate transcript.
So after Pete says, are you? Dan says, yeah, I am going. Well, I'm off work for it. I'll put that, and then Pete Musical interjects, okay.
Yes,
Dan then says, well, I'm committed to it. Just because like Joe wanted to go to the one in Ohio and we be like 0 for 2 And by 0 for 2, Dan was referencing the Wolverine Watchman will be 0 for 2 for these meetings that have been set up.
Objection, they. It's important, Judge, to the names of the people that are
Yeah.
talking about
Try
going.
and use
Okay.
names a little more.
Well, on that one, I don't think I can. The quote from Dan is, well, I'm committed to it. Just because like Joe wanted to go to the one in Ohio and we'd be like 0 for 2, correct?
Correct.
Now, you don't know who Dan was including in the phrase we'd be 0 for 2, correct?
I think he's just referencing Wolverine Watchmen.
Okay, but it's a reference that the Wolverine Watchmen did not go to the meeting in Ohio.
Correct.
And if they do not go to the back check meeting, they'd be 0 for 2.
Correct.
Then Pete Musical says, what's the for or what to the meeting or, and Dan says, yeah. And Pete Musical says, okay. Dan says, because I'm assuming this meeting is pertaining to what went down in Ohio.
Yes.
Pete Musical says, this meeting is pertaining to kicking off the boog.
Kicking the boog off.
Kicking the boog off, correct. And Dan says, oh, really?
Yes.
Pete Musical says, yeah, that's the point, but I'm let you know right now, this ain't about fucking let's get prepped and ready to go. This is about pointing rifles at fucking police officers and politicians and squeezing the fucking triggers. Dan says, oh shit.
That's correct.
Right. And based on your monitoring of the training that day, you believe Pete Musical had heard Adam Fox's message.
Yes.
Okay. Pete Musical says, yeah, this ain't no joke. This is Fallujah. This is starting Fallujah in the United States. Dan, right. Pete Musical, that's what he's talking about. Dan, Adam is wanting to push that. Pete Musical says, yeah, it's what he's talking about. He listened to his message. And Dan says, yeah. Pete Musical says, his message is, listen, you fucking pussies, quit running your fucking dick suckers, and let's do something. Right? And Dan says, right, shit, I'd like to see what he's about.
Accurate.
Pete Musical never in that conversation says he wants to see what Dan's about.
What Dan's about?
Excuse me, he never says he wants to see what Adam Fox is about.
Just says, listen to his message and let's do something. He doesn't use the words, I want to see what Adam is about.
He never says he wants to go to the back check meeting.
Not in this transcript.
And in fact, he doesn't go to the back check meeting.
That's correct. He does not go to the back check meeting.
There's also a conversation between Pete Musical, Joe Morrison, and Dan regarding the same subject on that same day, June 14th, correct?
Yes.
And starts off, but Mr. Musical saying, but I mean, point blank, that's what he's down for, you know? And Joe Morrison says, Adam? Pete says, yeah. Joe Morrison says, yeah, you talk to him more than I do. The Musical says, do you know what he's down for? Morrison says, yeah, fucking kicking it off. Musical, yeah, straight out kicking that shit off. Morrison, I know. Musical, okay. And then Joe Morrison says, I'm not stupid. That's why I said it's no shit. Now here, Pete doesn't call Joe Morrison stupid, correct?
Correct.
And this is audio only. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
You're not there to see what type of look Pete is giving Joe during this conversation.
Correct. I couldn't tell you that.
But you do know that Pete is Joe's father-in-law.
Yes.
So this was a father-in-law to son-in-law conversation.
Correct. I mean, Dan's there engaged in conversation as well.
Well, Dan hasn't said anything yet, correct? In this transcript.
He, like, the next statement is Dan, but yes. I mean, I don't think you're mischaracterizing it.
So say, hey, Jada wants you. Go see Aunt Jada. Aunt Jada is calling you. Dan, that's what Ohio was pertaining. Morrison, yeah. Dan, are we coordinating some with other states too for it? Morrison, that's the nationals. It took a national thing to get it going. Dan, I mean, it's going to be like a domino effect, or are we going to say no shit on this day, musical Morrison, this day, this time, it'll be simultaneous? Remember that conversation?
Yeah, so this is exhibit 117.
Yep.
Yes, I think it's accurate.
Out of the three people that are in that conversation, the only one that actually goes to the Vac Shack in Grand Rapids to meet with Adam Fox is Dan.
It's correct.
On the 14th, there's also some phone calls that are made to Adam Fox.
Well, there's a conference call from the Watchman to Adam Fox, and then later, when Dan got back to our office, there's another phone call from Dan to Adam Fox.
And again, I would object. The Watchman, the call on June 14th you're talking about, Mr. Beller was not there, correct?
That's correct.
Now, Mr. Patrick made the point that I want to get into before discussing those phone calls. During this training, the audio, and I think it's through the review of the chat, there's a disagreement with Mr. Ballar and Jada Morrison.
I think that occurred on the June 28th training,
Yeah.
so the next training.
Next training. But Paul is not present, Mr. Ballar is not present during this conference call.
That's correct, on the June 14th.
And the conference call is to Adam Fox.
Yes.
And, you know, Dan's there, and I'm sure we're gonna get to the actual conversation while Dan is present. Adam Fox is talking to the Wolverine Watchman.
Yes.
Correct? And the call ends.
Correct.
Okay. Nobody from the Wolverine Watchman calls Dan back that day.
I don't,
Well, let me rephrase that.
Dan.
Pete Musical does not call Adam Fox after that phone call ends during the training of June 14, 2020.
I'd have to refer to the Pete Musico timeline of comms with Fox. That's exhibit 10. Yeah, so Pete Musico doesn't call. Let's see. So on June 13th, Pete Musico and Adam Fox have voicemails and direct messages. On June 14th, they have direct messages. And then Pete Musico does have a voice call for 9 minutes on the 14th, direct with Adam Fox.
Is that before or after the conference call?
I don't know. I'd have to go source it and look compared to like the chat analysis. I don't know offhand.
But on the 14th, you agree Dan leaves the training in Munich.
Yes, he does.
He drives to the FBI office in Flint.
Yes,
You're there.
I am.
Agent Chambers is there.
Yes,
And Dan is there.
yes.
You guys have Dan call Adam Fox back.
Adam Fox calls Dan, and then we go grab a recording device and call him back.
Does Adam Fox call Dan, or is there some communication between Dan and Adam Fox via Facebook before this call?
I believe they communicate on Facebook, and Adam Fox sends his phone number on Facebook and says something to the effect of, "We need to talk. We can't discuss this," on Facebook, and gives his phone number. Something to that effect.
And is it Dan that initiates the Facebook contact with Adam Fox after he leaves?
Dan friends him on Facebook, and then Adam Fox responds to his friend with the statement about, "Let's not talk on here. Here's my phone number."
Well, prior to that, Dan, after the Facebook friend request is accepted, Dan send a message to Adam Fox about getting more tactically squared away.
I don't remember. It may have not. I can't remember the exact Facebook conversation between Dan and Adam Fox.
Okay, we'll get to that when Dan testifies. But now you guys have Dan call Adam Fox back.
Yes,
Pete Musical didn't instruct Dan to call Adam Fox back on that day, correct?
that's correct.
Okay, he wasn't even there. In the FBI office in Flint.
Correct, he was not in the FBI office.
On June 18th, there is another protest at the Capitol. This is where Adam Fox, Morrison, Musical, and Ballard meet, correct?
Yes, this is the initial meeting with Adam Fox and the Wolverine Watchman.
Now, during the trainings in Munis, Watchman members have to leave their phones in the car. Up until this point.
I don't know if they had to. I think it was suggested that they don't take pictures and they don't have their phones out at training. I know that it was a little more loosely enforced up until Adam Fox came, and then it was strictly enforced.
Now, you've been to a gun range before, I presume?
Yes, sir.
Not allowed to have your phone out at the gun range, are you?
I don't know. I've had my phone. You certainly shouldn't like operate a firearm with your phone.
Okay. Now, June 18th, at this meet, Adam Fox pats people down.
We hugged people and he seemed a little touchy when he did it. So Dan thought that touchiness was feeling for a wire. He advised us about that.
And that was Dan's interpretation of what Adam Fox was doing.
Correct.
Adam Fox never said to anybody, "I'm checking you for a wire."
Not that I could hear.
And after this meeting at the Capitol, the Wolverine Watchmen, some members are talking about Adam Fox, correct?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
And there's some concerns about Adam Fox.
What, are we talking on the 18th?
Yes.
And we're still at the Capitol?
Well, after leaving the Capitol.
So I believe when they left the Capitol, everyone went home. I don't recall any specific conversation from that day about Adam Fox. I'm not saying it didn't occur.
Now, the 20th rolls around, correct?
Correct.
The invitation from Adam Fox to come to the Vac Shack is shared with the group.
Yes.
Nobody is ordered to go meet with Adam Fox.
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Musical does not go.
Correct.
Okay. Dan goes.
Yes.
Adam Fox is smoking marijuana at this meeting.
Yes.
A lot of things are discussed at that meeting.
Yes.
Protests are discussed.
Yes.
Getting arrest warrants for politicians is discussed.
Yes.
Barry Croft is well, first of all, the meeting in Ohio is discussed, correct?
Yes.
Adam Fox says some of them were pretty far-fetched and extreme, I'll be honest, but I mean, there is some things that we can do.
Yes.
Okay. And you don't know which things he's talking about, which he says that there are some things that we can do.
Well, I believe they went on later to discuss those things in the meeting. So in context, I think I can answer the question.
Right. Now, at this time, there were coordinated protests, 2A protests throughout the nation.
There was a lot of protests going on throughout the nation.
Okay.
I don't know about coordinated 2A. I remember Operation Gridlock, which was coordinated nationally.
And there were coordinated protests of people going to governmental buildings in open carry, correct?
I think that's always been the case.
Adam Fox makes a complaint about, they're lawless as fuck. They're fucking running kids and shit and child molesters. And we're sitting here just holding our morals like it's, the greatest thing in the world, correct?
Yes.
During the course of this investigation, while looking at these Facebook pages and returns, Jeffrey Epstein discussed?
Yes.
Okay. We now know 2 years later, Jeffrey Epstein had some contact with some pretty important people,
Seemed like a big shot.
including one of the princes of England, right? Got himself in a little trouble involving Jeffrey Epstein.
I read a lot of things about Jeffrey Epstein. I really don't know what's true and what's not.
All right. I think the Queen should have thought it was true. He got put on punishment, didn't he?
I don't know. There's a lot of drama over there in the royal family.
All right. Amanda Keller specifically says, like Gordon. Gordon is crazy. Adam Fox says, yeah, Barry is something else, man. Is that correct?
Yeah, so Gordon Croft is another Facebook or alias of Barry Croft. So yes, definitely.
Adam Fox goes on to talk about July 10th, 11th, and 12th. Dan says, where is it at? Whereabouts? Wisconsin, northern Wisconsin, right?
Yep. Yes, sorry.
So Adam Fox is again referencing Cambridge, Wisconsin, which was referenced in the initial conversations with Joe Morrison and was referenced in Dublin, Ohio.
Yes.
This is the annual yearly training at Steve Robeson's compound or residence.
Well, I don't believe they're referencing the annual training. I believe the annual training is occurring, and then the group is talking about going to that annual training, which was planned.
Okay. Adam Fox then goes on to say, and this was one of the exhibits, that's our opportunity to take out top tier, bro. Exactly. Because now who's protecting the politicians? Let's fucking charge and arrest them first. And then we can worry about putting back into a freaking public service what it was supposed to be. Correct?
Yes.
Throughout, these conversations, it was always talked about potentially getting arrest warrants for tyrannical politicians.
Early on, it was a topic of discussion, and then they talked about how they couldn't do it the legal route, and they abandoned that idea. At some period, I think generally speaking, they did discuss that. I think that's fair.
Okay. Dan and Fox start talking about the training that the Wolverine Watchmen do on Sundays, correct?
I know Dan was in the conversation. I remember Paul Bellar brought up the training and how the Watchmen purged members and described that with Ty Garbin. I know Ty Garbin was bragging about it to Adam Fox.
Good. Referencing the transcript.
Which exhibit are you looking at, Counselor?
134T.
Okay, I have it here.
At the bottom, Dan says we try not to blitz people like that because you want them to come, but you also want to be cost effective, for people. Adam Fox, at this point, man, what is the cost though? $20 fucking dollars in gas? Fucking not shit. Dan, well, for me, it's an hour and a half out for me to get down there. Fox, to get to where? And Ty Garbin and Dan both say Joe's place. And Fox says, where's that? By Jackson, and Dan says, yeah. Remember that?
That's an accurate transcript, yes.
Okay. And then Adam Fox goes on to say, I'm on wire. I've been talking to Joe on wire. And then Bellar says, well, shit, right?
Yes.
Okay. Ty Garvin says, well, keep talking to him. Dan says, yeah,
Which transcript are you on, Council?
136T.
Oh, okay. Yes, I have it here.
Is that accurate?
Yes,
Garvin says, because Joe's like our talk to people guy. And Dan says, he's a network guy.
yes.
That's how they described Joe when they were meeting with Adam Fox in the basement of the vac shack.
That's correct.
They go on to talk about Wisconsin. And now I'm referencing 139T.
I have it here.
Bottom of 139T. Dan starts talking about Dan, Adam Fox, and Amanda Keller talking about what's going to go happen in Ohio, correct? Excuse me, Wisconsin.
Yes, Wisconsin.
All right. And they're talking about, what they perceive to be in Wisconsin, right?
Correct.
In the middle of that, Paul says, yeah, I'm going to take off. Correct?
Hold on, I'm looking for it here.
Well, actually in context, Dan says you out man, and Paul says, yeah, I'm going to take off.
Yeah, I see that here, page 2.
Now, we talked about June in the chat logs, correct?
Yes.
After that meeting, it's discussed, what Adam Fox is again discussed, correct?
Yes, after the back check meeting, the group discussed it on leadership.
Adam Fox is not a member of the Wolverine Watchmen.
Correct.
The Wolverine Watchmen have some serious concerns about Adam Fox.
I think that's accurate. It's not reflected right there right away on the 20th, but they certainly have a lot of concerns that they discuss at length before he comes to Munich on the 28th.
Dan vouches for Adam Fox.
I know Dan was part of those discussions. He certainly participated. I think he said something about how he thought he was okay, or he would be willing to give him a try, something to that effect.
And Dan, at this point, had Dan been tasked with getting Adam Fox with Joe Morrison?
No, so what I tasked Dan with was to follow the violence. So he's supposed to go in the direction of any attack planning. So if attack planning is going to take off over here and there's going to be a shadow group and an operators group, Dan was supposed to go to where the attack planning was and follow the violence. So if Adam Fox was the violence, I tasked Dan to go towards that violence, see if he could be where Adam Fox was as he was planning violence.
During this time frame, Dan even, and as Mr. Ballard discussed, calls Joe Morrison's wife, Jada.
I know there's a recorded phone call between the two. I believe Jada reached out to Dan. I don't know if Dan called her back or if he just answered. By the time the recording picks up, they're just talking.
Now, going back to the 14th, so in June, there was a training after that conversation, correct?
Well, June 14th was the mandatory training. where they were gonna purge the members who didn't show up.
Did Pete Musical train on that day?
Yes,
Okay. You reviewed the main chat logs from June 2014, correct?
yes,
The Pete Musical post on June 14th, 2020. Hey guys, sorry I missed training. And Gunny respond, you Gucci. Gunny and Gunny's Ty Garvin, correct?
Gunny's Ty Garvin. I don't recall that post. If it's in the chat log and it can refresh my memory, I'd refer to the chat logs and the recordings as the best evidence.
On the June chat logs, page 61.
A piece of evidence?
No, this is for impeachment only.
No. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were asking to refer to.
No, I'm telling him where it's at, because I assume that the way he said it, he had it up there in front of him.
No, I
Okay.
think so.
Yep, Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes, go ahead.
On the phone right now, Your Honor. So I gotta kind of kick me back to the beginning. I apologize. Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes.
So I believe the date on this is June 21st, 2020. Went up to the next one. I know Pete Musico was present during the recording when gunfire was going off on this date. I see the reference there where he said, sorry, I missed training. I have the recording with the gunfire going off during the training. So I don't really know what he's referring to. May have been a different training.
Well, the 621, that's on page 154, 155, correct?
Yes. So you got to scroll up quite a bit of ways on the chat log to find the date at the beginning of it. I know Pete Musico was present during the course of training on the 14th because I have audio recording. I live monitored it.
I agree with you on that. He's present at the training and engages in conversations. But does he actually train on June 14th? We're gonna get to the 21st as well.
Oh, yeah. So to clarify, I don't know what he's doing. I'm just listening to the audio. So when I hear gunfire, I don't know if he's shooting, if somebody else is shooting. I don't have that information.
You agree with me, when they're having that conversation, they don't appear to be shooting guns while they're talking about the message that Adam Fox sent.
There's gunfire. I think based on the context, it's probably somebody else who's shooting guns.
And Ty Garvin does respond, "You're Gucci," correct?
Yes, that's accurate on the chat log.
Now, "you Gucci" means you good.
That's correct.
Now, the trainings that the Wolverine Watchmen do are combat style trainings, correct?
Yes.
Urban combat style trainings, correct?
Yes.
They make statements about the group being for defensive purposes, correct?
Yes.
The military does not classify tactics as offensive or defensive, correct?
I don't know. I've never been in the military.
The actual training that was done at Munich, there was a makeshift home, correct? I think they refer to it as a kill house.
Correct.
Entering in what is, this is the terminology they give it, kill house can be for offensive or defensive purposes.
To me, a kill house is very offensive.
So when, let's say, hostage rescue teams practice at a kill house, they do so to practice rescuing people, correct?
Yes, I think that is fair.
You don't think rescuing people is a type of defense?
I think if a hostage rescue team makes a tactical entry into a residence, it's offensive. It's a pretty risky maneuver and it's inviting a confrontation. So they have to be ready for that confrontation. There's a series of steps you'd have to go through. You have to announce that you're law enforcement. You have to have lights and sirens. You have to have markings. Usually you have a hostage negotiator. So it's a very offensive thing to do, to tactically enter a building.
And the purpose of doing that is to save somebody, correct?
I sure hope the SWAT teams are trying to save people.
And Mr. Musico has no military experience, correct?
That's correct.
Mr. Musico did not lead any of those trainings.
Yes, lead's a very subjective term. I think, they're at his property and he's participating as an instructor from time to time. He certainly lets his opinion be heard. But I would say that, when they're running a tactical station, he's not like the guy at that station. He's not the medical guy. He's not the marksmanship guy. He'll come in and let his opinion be heard as he sees fit.
Really a good place to break, Mr. Johnson.
Yes, sir.
Let's see everybody back about 1:15.